mercy. Lord, you are good, and your mercy endureth forever. People could have given up on me, but you kept people around me, even when I was at my worst. Somebody was loving me. Somebody was praying for me. Forever. Lord, you are good, and your mercy endureth forever. Sometimes I just have to say that, because if I don't say that, cut through the noise of my head, I will be convinced that there is nobody on my side, that I am not worth saving, that I'm not worth loving, that I'm not worth getting to the other side of it. But the fact of the matter is, God is true, and his mercy does endure forever. Amen. And even though life is hard, God is strong. And just because life is hard, it doesn't mean that God is less strong and that his mercy isn't there. So together let's sing. Lord, you are good, and your mercy endureth forever. Let's stay right there. Lord, you are good, and your mercy endureth forever. Lord, you are good. Lord, you are good, and your mercy endureth forever. seem so overwhelming, that the sound of truth is so faint in our hearts and in our minds. Or maybe it's just me. And I have to sing songs like this, and I have to turn the volume up on my courage, and I have to turn the volume up on my bravery, and I have to turn the volume up on my trust, and the volume up on my faith, because the fact of the matter is God is a waymaker. He's a waymaker, sing. Waymaker, and he does miracles, and he's a promise keeper. Light in the darkness, that is who you are. He's not just light in the darkness, he's the light in my darkness. Waymaker. We talk. You give me a heads up. What in the world? And in those moments, I felt like my emotions and my logic were a jumbled mess, kind of like a ball of yarn when a cat gets a hold to it, and you can't find where it begins and where it ends. I remember being in a time of worship and seeing myself, the fullness of myself, jumbled up, so confused and so tangled and so broken and so disappointed and hurt, and not wanting to blame God, but not understanding Him either. And I remember seeing this in a vision. I saw myself bringing all of my broken self to Him, and I remember laying it at His feet and saying, "You're perfect in all of your ways. I don't understand it. I don't agree. But you're perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Because He is Lord. He is Lord. And I had to align myself with trust. And I said, God, you don't owe me an explanation. But you did promise that you would heal me. So I'll take that. I won't hold my praise hostage because you won't explain to me. I'll just trust you for my healing that you said that you do. Amen. You are my strength, strength like no other, strength like no other, reaches to me. Thank God. You are my strength, strength like no other, strength like no other, and it reaches to me. You are my strength, even though I don't feel it right now. You step in and save me somehow. And it reaches to me in the fullness of your grace, in the power of your name. You lift me up. Hallelujah. You lift me up in the fullness of your grace, in the power of your name. You lift me up. You lift me up. You are my hope. You are my hope. Hope like no other. Say hope like no other. And it reaches me in the fullness of your grace, in the power of your name. You lift me up. You lift me up in the fullness of your grace, in the fullness of your grace, in the power of your name. You lift me I didn't even have a help in me. But thank God, His strength reaches to me. Reaches to me. Reaches to me. Reaches to me. And I know that we're all at different places in our walk, but if you have the strength to reach, that's the beauty of corporate worship. Because we can create an environment that somebody else can benefit from that may not be strong enough to step into the troubled water. Y'all know what I'm saying? Okay. So if you have the strength, I just want you to join with me real quick. And I just want us to make a real concentrated, real thick kind of environment real quick. And just thank God for the fact that He reaches to us. Hallelujah. Reaches to me. Hallelujah. I thank you. Reaches to me. Your strength and your hope, God. It reaches to me. Your transformation, God, it reaches to me. It reaches to me. Your healing, God, it reaches. Oh, God, when I don't understand it, you're so reaches. Even when I give it up, God, it reaches. Hallelujah. It reaches. It reaches. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus.
Hallelujah. It reaches down wherever you are. Some days you feel like you're down in a hole so deep that you can't even see the light. But even there, He reaches. He reaches to you. Thank you, Reverend Candace, for setting the atmosphere. I just want to let you know straight up front that everything we do today is intentional. There's something that music can do for you sometimes that nothing else can do. Sometimes you're so down and so low you can't even see up. But to put on the right song and it starts ministering to you wherever you are. So this morning we want you to just set that atmosphere. Everything we're doing today is intentional. We want you to take up the toolkit and just keep dropping these things. So one thing, step one, I can create an atmosphere. Even when I'm having my worst day, I can put on some music and I can create an atmosphere. That's the first thing that we want you to put in the toolkit. When nobody's around you, pray for you and you call and everybody's feeling like it's busy or they don't have any money or they're good and you're calling. You can create an atmosphere all by yourself by just turning on some music. Amen. Amen. So right now the atmosphere has been set. And I just want to let you in on a little secret. There's a misnomer out there that there's a war on between sociology, theology, and psychology. We're here today to let you know that there is no war going on. That we actually all work in harmony. And that everything that we do is because the Lord has blessed us. So coming first this morning is going to be Dr. Carl.
Panic stricken.
Dr. Carl.
I saw someone sitting down there not moving. I was like, I had already called Jonathan, so I knew how to get it here. This is it. So I don't know how to import it.
30 years experience working in behavior and health field with children and adolescents as well as adults across the diagnostic spectrum. She has taught undergraduate and graduate courses at various universities in the United States. She has served on various mental health advisory boards in the U.S. and currently serves as a clinical psychologist for the University Wellness Institute. She is a woman of God. She loves God, and maybe she'll tell you a little bit more about herself. But this morning we want to start off with the theoretical basis. What is post-traumatic stress disorder? I also want to say today, just before she comes, that one of the other reasons why we're doing this yesterday was actually the 10th anniversary of the death of my twin sister Karen Assam. She was the other part of Twin Ministries, and she worked at Mid-Atlantic Wellness Institute. She was the head of the National Drug Control. Together we built Village Treatment Center. And can you imagine one day she woke up and had the nerve to be depressed? What? She was depressed. And she went for treatment in Bermuda and all, and they said, the doctor said, we can't do anything for this lady. She is so depressed. We think you should put on reboard, which is the long-term, long-stay work in the Atlantic Families Institute. Put them on record and leave them for the rest of her life. But that's all that we can do. She's totally hopeless. And so, us being the family that we are, we're like, this doesn't sound right. So we went and had a little chat with the Lord, and he said, look, if you guys can pray for her for 1 year, every single Saturday for a year, I will heal her. So we go to the kid. We prayed for a few weeks, nothing happened. She got worse and worse. They said, I'm sorry, we can't help her. God said, take her to England. We took her to England. She stayed in a psychiatric hospital in England for 6 months. They called us and they got on the plane. She was about to die. She's not going to make it. Come and get her. So we went to England, and it was my twin sister, weighing like 50 pounds. And she couldn't eat or anything. So we could continue. My mom had a lot of children, and people probably know that poor lady, but 5 of us hopped on the plane. And how you know that 2 or 3 gathered together and prayed for the child of God. The 5 of us hopped on the plane and went to London, and we prayed and we fed her and we prayed and we gave her and we prayed and we prayed. She got a little stronger. And they said, we can't do nothing else for her. So we said, okay, we started Googling everything. Was Google there? Yeah, Google was there then. We started Googling everything. And we saw some man who was doing some incredible stuff at Johns Hopkins University. So we hopped on the plane and we took her from UK to Johns Hopkins. And we kept on praying and they kept on working. He said, I think I can do something. We said, well, if you can, God's going to show you what to do. She was doing another 6 months. After a year, we noticed and treatment, we finally go back to the beginning. She was just a little bit better. She was in for a couple months and she said, I'm getting back to work. Now, how many of you know that you've been running a psychiatric hospital, you've been on the board as the head, and now you're getting back? How many people not going to follow you? However, she walked in there, they said, oh, Mr. Summer, we're so glad to see you back. And we're just holding on to the ward until you came back. She went right back into her position as a clinical manager on the ward, and she started to go, oh, she's still feeling 100% right. And then she said, I think God wants you to go back to school. I'm like, are you kidding? You're just getting better. She went back to school like 2 months or 3 months later. She did a double master's in management and human resource development, came up with a star, and then she said, I'm going back to do my PhD. I said, okay, cool. She went back and did her PhD. And when she died, she was like 3 months short of graduating with her PhD in leadership. So I'm just happy today God can do it. When you mix your faith and medicine, we didn't fight a war with the doctors. You let the doctors do what they can do. You let your faith do what they can do. You let the family and support system do what they can do. And with that threesome, we were able to help her to come back to who she's supposed to be. So don't reject it. Sometimes when we're faith-based, we reject the therapy. And don't reject what you hear today, starting with Dr. Bean. She's going to give you the theory. The Bible says we pray with understanding. So we have to understand what we're praying about. We have to understand what PTSD is. And she's coming this morning to give us that understanding. And then we'll move on to the other aspects. Dr. Bean, it's so good to have you this morning. Would you like to put in over here? Okay, please. See the power. So you want to and do yourself.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Dr. Carla Bean, and as Dr. Apopa said, well, she mentioned in my bio about 30 years of experience in the mental health field, but I think more importantly, I have a lot more years. I'm not going to tell you because then you're going to start calculating my age, but I have a lot more years of experience just serving God. Amen. And so I started out very young in ministry. I probably did my first sermon when I was in Sunday school. I remember my Sunday school class sermon, probably at about 10 and 11 years old. So I've been a long time serving God, ministering to His people, and I get excited when I see a room full of women that are worshiping, a room full of women that are pursuing God, that are ready to go to their next level. Amen? A room full of women that are seeking freedom. Amen? And so understanding, as Minister Lamb said earlier, that when you pursue God, that freedom in pursuing God is what frees you from whatever it is that may be holding you back in life. Amen? So we're going to look a little bit from that. Now, you're going to have to excuse me if I kind of slip into my preacher persona, but I'm going to try to stay on task. Dr. Apopa has asked me to talk to you this morning about post-traumatic stress disorder. So we're going to look at what does that look like? What is it from the psychological perspective? And it's good, as she said, to get understanding and understand that what we go through is not just figments of our imagination, but that there are actual disorders, and the scientific fields have actually looked into certain situations and syndromes and have put a it's called so that we know how to pray against it. Amen? So we're going to be talking about post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm going to start off by giving you a definition of what that is. As soon as our PowerPoint comes up. Okay, so we'll just talk until it comes up.
I'm working on it.
She's working on it. Okay. So post-traumatic stress, there's several key words in that definition. Trauma is one, and then stress is another very key word in that definition of post-traumatic stress. And so understanding, first of all, what is trauma? So trauma is if we look back, way back in antiquity, the original Greek word for trauma meant wound. And so as we went along in time, we began to understand that wounds are not just simply physical wounds, but wounds also can be psychological and emotional wounds. And so that's where the field looking at psychological trauma came about. And the term trauma took on more of a psychological meaning in terms of looking at it from a psychiatric or psychological perspective.
Okay, so while we're just getting back together, I guess I'll be the promotion person. So you see I have this wonderful shirt. And it was actually created by one of my young daughters. Renee, would you like to come up with it? And so this is one of the things we're trying to do today is reverse the DNA. Change among the things that are going on and trauma specialists will tell you sometimes when people have trauma, things get all rewired in their brain. And so sometimes we have to come up and reverse the DNA. So this is Lene, this is my daughter, and she's bought this lovely t-shirt. You have little vouchers inside your bag for $5 off these t-shirts. But can you give them a quick snippet about the dream that brought this t-shirt to life? Good morning, God bless you. Back in 2015, I did my very first sermon. And then thereafter, more following. And on a particular day, the Holy Spirit said it wasn't written, and He just said in the midst of that sermon, it's time to reverse the DNA. The message title at the time was wasn't a message for the outside, it wasn't for the world, it was for the body of Christ. And so often what happens is we take on the world and we bring it into the church, and we live our lives based on what we learned in the church, and we believe that that's the way that it's supposed to happen. And He just gave a clear vision of what reversing the DNA was. So I read a book by the name of Armeter, and it was called The Divine DNA. And I had read that book maybe about back in 2009. And so back in 2015, coming up into 2015, it completely made sense why He had me read that book back then, and what my life looked like, and what our lives looked like. And He used my life and the vision of my life as an example and a testimony, because the person who you see standing before you was not the person, obviously, who first walked into the body of Christ. I was involved in forms of prostitution. I was involved in drugs. I was involved in the world. And as a result, He changed the DNA that the world told me I had to the DNA of Christ. Because the DNA is ultimately reversed as a result of who He is in us. So that's where the scripture came from, as well as the meaning of the shirt. So I pray that it'll bless you and bless others, and that at some point you'll begin to see shirts that on the back say DNA reversed. So everything is intentional. We are decreeing that people are the girl here, and your whole nature's going to be changed. And so while they're still waiting, I guess I'll go and do one more thing while we're waiting, and that is I'm going to give out these cards. Remember, I just coming back with a memory card. I'm going to give out a memory card, and what I want you to write on that card is, what is that thing that every time you do it in your head, every time you're just about to do the most amazing things in your life, that memory pops up on, as you go through everything, we want you to focus on the fact that this is what I'm reversing. I'm reversing the DNA or whatever that situation is. So whatever it is, you're going to feel like that thing that every time you're just about to be the most amazing person in the world, and that comes out, it makes me a memory of your mama days when you was young. You're so stupid, you look like your daddy. And every time you're just meant to be amazing, it says, no, you're stupid like your daddy. And there you become immobilized. That's the memory. Oh, that memory that every time you get up to do something and you were sexually abused as a child and you get up there and other people are up there and you can't let you do that in some position, not good enough. And so you forget what it was. What is that memory? Just tell me that piece of paper. That's the memory we're going to work with because we have all sorts of memories, but we can only work with one at a time. So what is that most particularly mean? No, I'm not good enough. I'm not as pretty. Sometimes, like when I was growing up, like my niece said, don't put that child into white collar clothes because she's real black. Just so, so back then, color was your key or your admission into these back in the day. So if you feel light skin with what they call good hair, that you got to do a whole lot of things. But if you're black with other, you just say the child's too black. So every time you try to think of it, I think I can't do it. Maybe I'm too black. I'm too insignificant. Maybe my hair is too nappy. And I am so free now. I was so European for all these years. I had all these fines burning off my scalp. And all this stuff trying to be this European woman. And for a whole year now, I have put curls in my hair. Like the woman just twisted in my fingers, what in the world? And I go out, and I'm just the happiest woman in the world. Because I understand that who I am has nothing to do with my hair, has nothing to do with the scalp color of my skin. My DNA has been right psychologically, so I know that who I am is who I am in the inside. So I don't have to real crazy. I just put my fingers through it, and I still think I'm good enough. Because I feel like this is what people want to be able to do throughout this day. But next time, see everybody's just going to be looking crazy, right? Sign of liberation. I mean, this is my good fan, Peggy Jackson, maybe 100 years. And she was probably now the Lord she'll see me with my I'm just feeling so happy about it. It's so free. Have you sorted it out yet, ladies?
No, we're with the technician now.
Okay, so this is just a symbol of what you're going to do. So put that memory down, whatever it is, that one thing, that lie that somebody told you when you was a child, that lie, that thing that you have defined yourself as, and it was only your behavior, but now you define yourself as that behavior, and that's not who you are. It never was. It was your response to your pain inside. And we respond, but when in pain, we respond in all different ways. But then people try to make us believe it's us. It's not us. It's just the response to our pain. Put that memory on. But that's what we're working towards, getting rid of that memory by the end of the day. So just put it in the process under it. Let's go to the day. You're like, this is the thing that I'm going to overcome. So by the end of the afternoon in my presentation, you're going to be running around in victory. The other thing I'll tell you just while we're waiting is that I have made certificates. If anybody needs certificates for personal development hours or contact hours, then we have certificates under rewarding me, and you just have to drop your name into, and those certificates will be available for you. Also, at the end of this afternoon, we have left some consultation sessions, 15-minute consultation sessions, not therapy sessions. We cannot do therapy in 15 minutes, and we are not trying to evaluate or erase anything that your counselor, your doctor, or anybody has already told you. But what we have is 15-minute consultation sessions, so when we have coffee break, and when we have lunch break, you can sign up at the table. The real objective of this session is to say, what's my next step? Because I don't like when people come to things, or I go to things, and when I leave, I don't even know what my next step is. So we will be offering you consultations so that you have a very clear idea what is your next step when you leave here today. You can sign up. Some people have already signed up. And so the schedule will be at the registration desk if you want to put your name on.
Okay.
All of us, we are wonderful women of God, but we are also very much trained in mental health services. So we will come to you with a clinical background led by the power of God. But we are not trying to treat you. We're giving you your next steps at this time. So that's something else that we can do.
Can I take that out the back? Can you reject it?
So we've got that done. Now, how are we doing upstairs?
Well, no, I'm gonna go and print a hard copy right now
Okay.
because we're having problems. Sorry.
So just while we're waiting, because I look like Dad's morning. What else can I tell you about what you can expect today? So going back to all those big books I bought, how many people journal?
That's not it.
Yay, good. How many people find it very, very helpful?
What's up there?
Yes. One of the things I like about
Wonderful.
journaling is that I can look back a month from now, I can look back a year from now, on the days when I think I haven't really accomplished much.
thank you.
I haven't really
You got it?
accomplished much.
No, I don't know.
When you go back to your journal, you can trace the movement that you have made. So I really want to encourage everybody to go forward on this day and make sure that you journal. It
I
doesn't
don't
have to
even
be,
know.
You know, if I started journaling, I'm going to say, what if I die suddenly? And somebody gets a
But I can't change it.
It's too late, man. I'll be gone.
Huh? What?
Something in your mind, something in yours.
I'm
I
trying.
was writing something one day. So I teach this other course like called self-awareness. And in self-awareness, we do something called
Should I
recovery.
print a hard copy again?
Yes.
More I become more discover self, become more self-aware. So I was teaching how to my aim is always to go and have my open self become wider and wider, and my other people do is become smaller and smaller. That's my goal, right? My hidden self, my blind self. So always talking about the hidden self, because we move to a real broad place. But I found recently that if you want people to heal, they gotta let them know their stuff. They gotta know what healing looks like. If I just keep on saying I always look like this, you don't know how that healing is available. You don't know that as the executive director of the Mid-Atlantic Wellness Institute, I woke up one day and I couldn't even think. And somebody was saying, you know, take antidepressants. Don't say, what? Antidepressants? I'm here at the psychiatric hospital. What in the world? But I have to tell it so that you guys can know that none of us are going to accept from having these types of experiences if we don't deal with our stress. If we don't allow ourselves to acknowledge I'm struggling and forget about all the crying and stuff, we could all end up being consumers of online services. Yeah? And so we have to start being willing to share. People say nothing's happening, people aren't changing. Like, they are changing, but we're keeping it all a secret. So today, during the day, I'm just going to be being really real. And, you know, I love Lene. I love Lene because she's so real, right? I mean, when I first met her, and I was like, this is a wonderful young lady, right? And I was raised in Penny Ford, so we were good not to be judgmental. I'm not anymore, but I was raised to be judgmental. It was like a quiet body while I'm for being, you know, I had it. So I met Lene, I was really loving her, and she's a wonderful daughter for me. Then she said, I used to pole dance. I was down on the floor. And OMG, maybe not. But I'm remember that nothing. She's helped to make me more real. She doesn't know. She's helped me to make me more real by just being who she was. Right? I know we could be friends with somebody who pole dance or whatever. It's all the same. It's all the same thing. We're all saying like this. So now that I give you a little more about the dance open self, not mine. I think we're now ready to start. I think the little girl is going to picture of our company. Okay, here we go.
Thank you. So now we're going to get back on track. Thank goodness that Dr. Apopa has the gift of ad-lib. So she can keep us entertained while we're waiting. So back again, talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and what it is. So we were looking at the two key words in that definition, which is trauma and stress. So what is post-traumatic stress disorder? It is actually a serious condition that can develop after a person has experienced or witnessed a traumatic or terrifying event in which serious physical harm has occurred or was threatened. So when we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, it is a disorder that can develop, not will or necessarily will, but can develop after a person has experienced trauma. So we were looking at what the definition of trauma is, and there is, you can go to the next slide, there is, so there is something that is called, okay, here we go. First of all, let's look at what is go through situations. Stress can lead to physical manifestations. Oftentimes when you're going through stress, you can feel, a lot of physical symptoms, whether that be headaches or whether that be just being tired. And there are actual chemical things that go on in the brain, like cortical levels are decreased and increased, and et cetera, when you're going through stress. Stress, however, is different. When we're talking about trauma, we're talking about a more serious condition versus stress. So trauma definition again, an event that involves an actual or threat of serious harm, death, or threat to an individual's physical integrity, which a person experiences, witnesses, or learns about. So that's important to understand, because it's not only that you actually experienced it yourself, you could have witnessed somebody else experience it, or you could have learned about it. And this is something that new that they added to what we call the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which gives an account of all of the psychiatric conditions. They've now added in that you can go through post-traumatic stress by learning of a serious incident that someone else has gone through. So this could be someone that usually someone that you're very close to. Now that's very important also when you're thinking about children and young children and what they're going through, which is why it's so important that we guard our children, that we pray over them, that we keep them safe, and that we, from the time that they're very young, teach them how to pray themselves and how to keep themselves and guard their own hearts. Because a young child can hear about or learn about something that, say, their parent has gone through, or a sibling or someone that they're close to, and they can then develop post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's a quote that says, trauma is more than a state of crisis. It is a response to any event that shatters one conceived ideas of life. It's a normal response to abnormal events that overwhelm a person's ability to adapt to life. Now that is very important, that part there, where it says, a normal response to abnormal events that overwhelm a person's ability to adapt. So what is that saying? That's saying that anybody can go through post-traumatic or trauma. Anybody can go through an experience of trauma. And so when people develop symptoms from it, it's not to feel that something's wrong with you because you develop symptoms from the trauma. It is a very normal response to abnormal events. So because the event is typically outside of our control, something that we cannot control, and so it becomes, our response to it becomes the abnormality. It's not us that's abnormal. It's the event itself. Psychological trauma. Let's look specifically at what that is. Psychological trauma is a type of damage to the mind that occurs as a result of a distressing event. That is important. Mind is emphasized because it is talking about what part of us. So from a biblical perspective, we understand that we are tripart beings. Body, soul, and spirit, right? So when it says a type of damage to the mind, what is it talking about? It is talking about that soulish nature of man, which is what? The reasoning faculties, it's our emotions, it's the things, our will, it's the things that we go through, is where we imagine things, it is where we dream things, it is where we can plan ahead. Those types of things happen in the mind, which is also used a lot, the same as heart in the Bible. So the mind, the heart, that's in the soulish realm of man. It also says often the result of an overwhelming amount of stress that exceeds one's ability to cope or integrate the emotions involved with that experience. So psychological trauma is often the result of an overwhelming amount of stress. So we talked about what stress was earlier. But when it becomes overwhelming and it exceeds one's ability to cope or integrate your emotions with that experience, that's when it becomes psychological trauma. So oftentimes, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but oftentimes what happens when people go through trauma particularly young people, go through trauma, that what's called dissociation occurs. And so that means that there are parts of themselves that are separated or broken off because they don't want to continue to face the reality of what happened. So what happens in psychological theory says that there are those emotions that are so overwhelming that's connected to that event become then stored in other areas of the brain or the mind. So you separate yourself from it. And in separating yourself from it, you oftentimes can take on somewhat of a different persona. Like young people, for instance, may go through dissociative events where they imagine that there's somebody else, or it goes beyond just that imaginary friend. They begin to actually experience themselves as being somebody else or experiencing somebody else with them. So it's a separation because it's too difficult to integrate those emotions. Let's look at the scientific diagnostic criteria. And I talked about the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. That is what psychologists and psychiatrists call our Bible, in a sense, because it lists all of the diagnostic criteria for all of the psychiatric conditions that individuals may go through. So PTSD, according to the DSM-5, is, first of all, exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, sexual violation. Now, this is specifically mentioned in the DSM-5, whereas in other earlier versions of this manual, it was sexual violation was not specifically mentioned, but that's important to understand, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Sexual violation in one or more of the following ways: either directly experiencing the event, witnessing in person the event, learning that the event has occurred, or experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to adverse details of the event. So, for instance, I had a cousin when they had 9/11, 9/11, when the Twin Towers were brought down. And I had a cousin who worked doing construction work, road rebuilding, etc. And they had all of those types of workers come together and recover like body parts and recover pieces of the buildings. And so he described just going through pieces of building and finding an arm or a leg or a hand. And he described how he was just so distraught over that and how that traumatized him so that he would go home at night and just hug his dog because he just felt like, as a man, he didn't know how to manage those emotions that he was feeling. He was experiencing post-traumatic stress. And it was because of the repeat, and it was day after day he would have to go. He would have to recover this. Day after day he would have to dig through rubble and debris, and he would find his body parts. And so he was developing post-traumatic stress. There is another disorder. Again, I'll talk a little bit more in detail about it a little later, but there's another disorder called complex post-traumatic stress. Complex post-traumatic stress is when, just as I just described, you experience trauma over and over and over again. So, for instance, say a child who's being molested over and over again multiple times, or goes through different situations where they may have been molested, then they're removed from their home because child and family is involved. Then the trauma of being removed from parents. Then there's the trauma maybe of the parents, the foster parents, are not treating them like they should. And then there's trauma after trauma after trauma. So what develops is what's called complex post-traumatic disorder. The next criteria for PTSD is the traumatic event is persistently re-experienced in the following ways. It's recurrent, it's involuntary, and intrusive memories. So that's one of the areas, and I'm going to break it down in terms of exact what those areas look like. But you hear of people who have constant dreams or flashbacks or just memories. Something can trigger a memory of the event. That's one of the major diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress. Nightmares, dissociative reactions, which I just described. And it may also be intense or prolonged distress after exposure to traumatic reminders. There's marked physiologic reactivity after exposure to trauma-related stimuli. So you find that there are physical, Dr. Apopa described earlier when I first came in, she was talking about her own situation and how physically you just can feel tired and drained. And I remember myself, I went through a situation, probably more in the depression continuum, but within this you have to understand, within post-traumatic stress, there is a continuum. So there are other disorders that may be diagnosable, like depression, like anxiety, things of that nature. So I remember myself going through a situation where I had believed God, I had believed God, I had believed God for this thing, and it just seemed like it just wasn't happening. I had word after word that it was going to happen. I had prophecy after prophecy for years. Oh, that this was going to happen, this was going to happen. And at the time, I was in the church, I was a minister, I was working with the youth, I was preaching and teaching, but I found myself one day, I went to get up out of my bed, and I couldn't move. It just like all of a sudden, I went to get up for work, and I could not move. I literally had to fall out the bed, crawl to the bathroom, try to get up. I'm crying hysterically, didn't know what was going on. I'm trying to get dressed. I couldn't get dressed because I'm shaking, and physically all of this was going on in my body. And so I said, God, what is this? What in the world is going on? And he clearly spoke to me. He said that it's a spirit of depression. And he said, you need to break it and come against it. And so immediately, I went from the bathroom, I ran back to my room, and I started just coming against the enemy. And I started just declaring and saying, I'm coming against depression right now. And I began to pray and plead the blood. And within about maybe 10 minutes, it lifted. Now, I understand that that's a very unique story. It doesn't happen like that for everybody. So, and if it doesn't happen like that for you, then, or hasn't happened like that for you, it's not because something's wrong. That's not your process. God wanted me to understand. He wanted me to know what it felt like. But he also wanted me to know, as a person that counsels people, what it feels like for it to be lifted off of you through prayer and through being able to identify what it is. So you can have those physical experiences where, like I said, where you're just drained and you don't know, you feel like you don't have any energy and you can't move. Another criteria for post-traumatic stress is what we call avoidance. So there may be efforts to avoid any distressing trauma-related stimuli after the event. So, for instance, a person may have been sexually molested in the back alley on the way home one day. So, from that time on, they're going to avoid that area. They're not going to, or any back alley for that matter, or even walking home late at night. So, anything could trigger, so they begin to avoid those particular things that are seen to be connected to that event. Any trauma-related thoughts or feelings, trauma-related external reminders, people, places, conversations, activities, objects, or situations. The next criteria is negative alterations in cognitions and mood. And basically what that means is that oftentimes a person sort of locks away in their memory things that may have happened. So there is the inability to recall key features of the traumatic event. A lot of times when I'm counseling with young people and they've been through trauma, and I will ask them, part of the healing process is to be able to tell their story, to be able to sort of give a recount of what happened. And so oftentimes when I'm asking young people to tell their story, certain things they just don't remember. And it wasn't because they were too young, or they just have locked those memories away because they were too frightening for them. So they lock certain memories away. And so often a part of negative cognitions could be distorted negative beliefs about yourself. For instance, I'm bad. Something bad happened to me, so that makes me a bad person. That is one of the main cognitive distortions that I hear young people, particularly that have been sexually abused. I'm a bad person. I'm not worth anything because somebody did something to me and they can't understand. And even as an adult, certain things may happen to you. You may not be able to make sense of it. Why somebody would do that. So, or even begin to think negatively about God. Why would God allow those things to happen? So, because of that, because you don't want to think the person or God or somebody you may have, or the institution or whatever it is that you may have valued, you don't want to think that they're bad, so then you turn it on yourself. I'm the bad one. It happened to me because I'm bad. I deserve that to happen. The way of trying to make sense of what doesn't really make sense. So distorted blame of self and others for causing the traumatic event or the resulting consequences. Persistent negative trauma-related emotions such as fear, anger, guilt, shame. These are all things that can happen as a part of the criteria for being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. There's also diminished interest in significant activities. So things that you used to like to do, you no longer like to do them. You no longer have interest in doing things. You just, and that may be because you're feeling depressed and down or lack of energy, but you no longer have interest in doing certain things. So marked diminished interest. Feeling alienated from others. So there's sort of like a detachment. Socially, you don't feel like you have that support group, and that may be because you're isolating yourself because of what you've gone through. Or it may be that you don't have that support group around you, but then that becomes magnified. So it's like you're feeling this sense of detachment. Another criteria is constricted affect, or the persistent inability to experience positive emotions. So it's very hard now to feel happy. It's hard to feel satisfied. It's hard to feel those positive emotions that you used to feel. Now everything is sort of looked at in a negative light. Now, for post-traumatic stress to be officially diagnosed, those types of things have to go on for more than a month. Then the official diagnosis can be made. And it also has to be significant symptom related to stress or functional impairment. So as Dr. Apopa described earlier, just not being able to do the things that you normally do. Your job, being able to function on your job, being able to function in your home. If you're a mother or wife, those things that you typically would do in those roles, you're not able to function in those roles anymore because you don't have the motivation, you don't have the energy in order to do that. Now, I'm going to skip some of the technical stuff and sort of get into more practical. So that was sort of our scientific, some of the background in terms of what the diagnosis means. And as I said earlier, the new DSM has specifically included sexual assault as a part of trauma. And I think for so long that has been sort of separated. When people thought about post-traumatic stress, they often thought about people who've been to war and those kinds of experiences, or people overseas who they've been bombed, or even natural calamity, things like that. But post-traumatic stress can occur with a variety of situations. And some of them not so typical that we would typically think of. And so we do know that sexual trauma is a major trauma. But post-traumatic stress can occur, particularly with little kids, from witnessing their parents fighting a lot. That could be something that triggers post-traumatic stress in a child. So there are various things that can trigger it, that can lead to the diagnosis. That also they have now included that children younger than 6 years old can actually experience the symptoms, whereas before they thought they might have been too young to know really what was going on and make sense of things. But children younger than 6 now officially, according to the diagnostic manual, can be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. And again, that's very significant when we're looking over our kids, and I work with kids, so they're very near and dear to me. So it's very significant when we're with our children to be able to protect them from things that they might go through. So to put this all in, I guess, plainer terms, there are 4 distinctive, I guess, domains, we will call them, or areas when you're talking about post-traumatic stress. One is re-experiencing. So that might be, again, through dreams, through flashbacks, through things that just sort of trigger memories of the event. The other major domain is avoidance, which we talked about. Avoiding situations, avoiding people, avoiding anything that seems to remind the person of the event. The other thing is the negative cognitions, and then there's mood and arousal. So those are the main areas to sort of put into plainer terms when we're talking about post-traumatic stress. There was re-experiencing, avoidance, negative cognitions, and then mood and arousal. Mood, and arousal. And I'll explain exactly what that means. So the reminders or re-experiencing means the reminders of the exposure, which we talked about, including the flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, nightmares, etc. The arousal piece would be what we would call activation, or sometimes people become what they would call as hyper-arousal. So they're like, every little thing they begin to focus on, like every little small thing they begin to focus on. That's called hyper-arousal. Also under that would be insomnia, not able to sleep, because your body is in a hyper-aroused state, or activated state. Or agitation, you may be more irritable than normal. Impulsivity and anger. Impulsivity is important under that because oftentimes people who don't have appropriate coping strategies may turn to substance abuse as a way of dealing with post-traumatic stress. Or they may turn to, we in the church, we don't drink or smoke, supposedly, so we may turn to food. We go out late after service or what have you, and we eat, so food becomes our comfort. Or you may turn to various other things that become almost like an addiction, right? Because you're looking for some kind of way to sort of block out what you've been through, or a way of self-medicating in a sense. So that impulsivity leads to those type of addictive behaviors. And then extreme anger. You find yourself sort of blowing up at people really quickly for very little reasons. Then the other area is the deactivation, which that includes the numbing, the avoidance, withdrawal. You can feel confused, sort of like your thinking is not where it should be. Dissociation, derealization, depression. And so that just simply means sort of stepping outside of yourself, other experiences that are outside of yourself, where I talked about earlier, sort of blocking off those emotions, blocking off what's too threatening to the psyche. You sort of shut that off, and that's where the splitting occurs. Oftentimes, sometimes, not often, people who go on to develop what's called borderline personality disorder. And borderline personality disorder is people who have sort of blocked off, and there's that fragmentation of the self where they cannot integrate the good with the bad. So again, the situation, they become all bad. People that they interact with interpersonally are either all good or all bad. They can't integrate properly, so they then go on to develop what's called borderline personality disorder. That's usually the longer-term effect of someone, or can be, not usually, can be a longer-term effect of someone who's been severely traumatized. And then the increased negative thinking. Okay, so we talked about the re-experiencing and the avoidance, the negative cognitions. So let's look at some common symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And this is sort of, again, in everyday, what we might experience termed sleeplessness. Not able to sleep. Panic attacks. Panic attacks are sort of anxiety episodes where you can feel like things are closing in on you. You're breathing, you start to hyperventilate. You can become, your palms are sweaty, your muscles tense, and it can just happen out of nowhere. Not knowing what triggered it or what caused it, is just all of a sudden. And the person feels very much out of control. It's a very frightening experience. So intense fear, nightmares, self-destructive thoughts or actions, depression, avoiding situations, feeling keyed up, hyperarousal, increased negative feelings and beliefs. So let's look at trauma reactions. And so understanding, and I'm going to talk a little bit more a little bit later about the physiology of it. What happens actually in our brains when we've experienced trauma? There's a person by the name of Pierre Janet that talks about hyperarousal. He says, hyperarousal causes memories to be split off from consciousness and to be stored as visual images or bodily sensations. Fragments of these visceral or bodily memories return later as physiological reactions, emotional states, nightmares, flashbacks, or behavioral reenactments. So basically what he's saying is that state that we're in causes us to store the memories or split the memories off from our conscious mind. So what I described earlier with the dissociation, it causes us to split that off. But it's got to be expressed in some kind of way. So the expression of it may come out in bodily or psychosomatic symptoms. So it is important that we are able to, use various methods of either talking to somebody, journaling, finding some way of expressing what's going on so that it does not come out in those ways through the visceral experiences that he described. Trauma reactions are also described as experience which overwhelm people's coping mechanisms. They set the stage or condition them to react automatically with excessive emotional reactions to current experiences rooted in the past. And that basically all that's talking about is when you see a trigger. For instance, you may have been, again, mugged by someone with a red shirt on. So now every time you see red or somebody wearing a red shirt, it triggers that memory of what happened. And then you can have that actual physical response because that memory is triggered by what your brain connected it to. And we'll look a little bit more later on about how that happens when your brain connects certain things, sensory experiences, to that memory. PTS, let's look at some quotes when they talk about PTS, the description of it. First of all, it deeply wounds the soul. I talked earlier about man being tripart being, so that soulish nature of man. Now, understanding that when you talk about PTSD, and I recently read something where they said PTSD is a disorder of the heart. And this was from a Christian perspective. And so what they were talking about was that soulish part of man. And when you look at that from that perspective, you can then understand it from the perspective of the enemy will use whatever foothold he can to bring about dysfunction in your life. So in that soulish realm, the enemy sort of gets a foothold through that, or tries to get a foothold through that trauma, that experience that you go through. So it begins to attack in your mind and your imagination, and so you begin to see things differently. You begin to experience things differently. This quote goes on to say that PTSD shatters the soul, destroys innocence, and in its place constructs a loss of faith in place of trust. Constructs doubt. Shame replaces self-esteem, and disillusionment replaces achievement. This is what can happen if the enemy gets that foothold into through that soulish realm, through that traumatic event. So then we begin to lose faith in the very thing that we the very institutions or the things that we held as those things that were the things that protected us, the things that guarded us, the things that we put all of our faith in. So we then begin to, as the next slide goes on to talk about, there's a violation of core assumptions. So those things that core beliefs are existentialistic beliefs of who we are, why we are here, what is our point, our purpose in life, why are we on earth? Those things begin to be shattered. We begin to question those things. And that is the very thing that the enemy wants to do, because he wants to knock you off of that foundation where your beliefs are, where you believe and trust fully in God. So there then can be a state of confusion and insecurity. Institutions that we depend on are seen as causing betrayal, major loss, separation from safety, self-worth, and our protected boundaries. So where we used to feel safe, we no longer feel safe. You know, if somebody suddenly passes in our life, then we begin to start questioning, well, am I safe? You know, how do I know? You know, particularly if it's a sudden event, how do I know that I'm not going to suddenly die? You begin to now question. You begin to question yourself. You begin to question your very existence in life. You begin to question God and say, well, God, you know, where were you when this happened? Well, I prayed. I believe. You know, I know the scripture. I know how to quote scripture. Where were you when I was going through this situation? So now that very core belief of who you are, that faith begins to become shattered. So the next slide talks about, so we want to go on to talk about spirituality, which is very important. There have actually been scientific research that shows that spirituality improves what they call resilience and ability to avoid and heal from traumatic symptomatology. So there have been psychologists and sociologists and people researchers that have got together and they developed like questionnaires and things that talk about spirituality, and they have actually determined that 90% of individuals who suffer from trauma-related illness identify spirituality as the primary restorative factor. No surprise to us. Amen. Right? Spirituality as the primary. So they're saying spirituality. We understand in a more concise level what that means. Spirituality, our belief in God and our trust in Jesus as our Savior. So we understand that when you have that foundation, that is one major resilience or restorative factor. So we as Christians understand, and when they talk about resilience, they talk about the ability to persevere through situations, those factors that are internal to yourself that help you to get through what maybe someone else may not be able to manage so well. Resilience. Children are often described as being very resilient. They go through situations and they seem like developmentally they're able to sort of bounce back. Or at least that's what they used to think. They're beginning to think a little different now. But that ability to sort of bounce back. So we understand that resilience really means your foundation, spiritually, what your beliefs are. I was really blessed when I looked at how a butterfly transforms from the cocoon into a butterfly. Mm-hmm. What happens is when they're in that cocoon, which is the chrysalis, when they're inside, there is actually a chemical reaction that takes place from the inside of that larva. So from the inside out, it's sort of like that chemical reaction, in a sense, consumes the body from the inside out and causes them to become a new creature. So when you look at that spiritually, what we have on the inside of us, you know, there's an old hymn or song that says, Jesus on the inside, working on the outside. Oh, what a change in my life. The Holy Ghost on the inside, working on the outside. Oh, what a change in my life. Understanding that when you have that internal, when you have that inside of you, that belief in who you are and that trust and that faith in God, and you have the Holy Spirit working on the inside of you, that is what begins to create that new. So whatever you're going through, whatever situation that you're in, your cocoon, it's what's on the inside. So that's what we understand resilience as. The scientific world calls it resilience, and they look at it from natural factors, but we understand it from a different level. 98% also identified a major factor as being able to talk to somebody. It is very important that we have people in our lives that we can connect with. You know, when I began to think about post-traumatic stress and look at it from a biblical standpoint, one of the characters that came to mind was Naomi. So Naomi lost her husband, she lost both of her sons. So this is the truth. She moved from the area that they were in to another area. I'm sure she experienced trauma. I'm sure that was trauma. So I'm sure she experienced some symptoms of trauma. But Ruth hooked up with Naomi. So Ruth thought it might have been for her benefit, but also it was for Naomi, because of what she went through, she began to see herself completely different. And she said, "Call me Myra," which means bitter. So a lot of times what we go through, we begin to see ourselves completely different, and we want to sort of redefine ourselves and who we are, but it's in a negative way, those negative cognitions that I talked about. We redefine ourselves in a negative way, so it's good to have somebody there that can say, well, wait a minute. You know, I'm with you. I'm going with you all the way. Somebody there that can kind of bring reality back to you, somebody that you trust. Now, I understand sometimes people don't know what to say to you, so they just say sort of things that are Christianese, cliche. Girl, Jesus is going to take care of it all, just don't pray. Right, so we do understand that we do need to pray and that Jesus is in charge, but sometimes people just don't know really what to say, which is different than really having that person with you to go through that process with you, who understands where you are, who can hook up with you and say through thick and thin, I'm with you. And through that relationship with Naomi and Ruth, there was, out of Naomi's pain, came, somebody was born through that was in the lineage of Jesus Christ, through Naomi's life, once she was able to make that proper hookup. So areas of the brain that are involved in post-traumatic stress. One area is called the amygdala. The amygdala triggers fight or flight response system. So that basically means when you are startled or frightened, it's either you're going to fight back or you're going to run. That's actually a response that's triggered in the brain when we face something that's shocking or traumatic. And it stores associated sensory information. That's what I talked about earlier. So if, like the red shirt example, somebody has molested you or abused you in some way and they had on red, the amygdala is the part of the brain that stores that information and makes that connection for you. It then sends out the danger signal to say, danger, danger, warning, something's going on that shouldn't be going on. But when things are safe, it's also the part of us that produces the calming thoughts. So amygdala-associated symptoms is the anxiety. So these are symptoms that are associated with the functioning of the amygdala, say that 3 times, amygdala. The functioning of the amygdala that happens in the brain. So it's anxiety, hypervigilance, avoidance, exaggerated startle, and the excessive activity of the brain in that area. Another area is the hippocampus. The hippocampus is involved in the encoding and recognition of episodic memories and environmental cues. So the context of when things happen and how they happen, including those that are present during fear, learning, and extension. So the hippocampus is the part that stores those memories of what happened during the event or the situation. So there is, science shows that people that have gone through post-traumatic stress, when they do actual imaging of the brain, it shows that there is hippocampal, there's sort of a shrinkage of the hippocampus. which is why when I talked earlier about you have difficulties with remembering certain parts of what happened, because physically there's actually a shrinking of the hippocampus. So trauma is a very real thing that really affects us in every area. And so these brain images scanning show that there are actually effects to the brain. Hippocampal reduction can limit proper evaluation and categorization of experiences. So you have a hard time, again, putting it into proper category with proper contents and making sense of it. Then there are other neurological effects. What's my time limit?
Keep going.
Okay, so we won't go through all of this in detail, but just some of them. So a post-traumatic stress disorder sufferer may struggle to find the right words to express what they're thinking. This is due to what's called the frontal lobe, which is responsibility for language, that's being affected by trauma, and it disrupts the linguistic or language ability to form language. It disrupts that functioning. So the frontal lobe, so you have the hard time sometimes when you're trying to express things and explain what happened, you're having a hard time finding the right words. You can have a hard time controlling your emotions, again, which goes back to amygdala, which is responsible for emotional regulation. Short-term memory loss can make you feel frightened no matter what you're doing. So again, that goes to the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for regulating emotion and fear response. So you can feel afraid at something that normally you would not feel afraid of because there's something small that might have triggered that reaction. Okay, so we'll go on to, I'm not going to share all of this. Let's look at some statistics. About 6 out of every 10 men, 60%, and 5 of every 10 women, 50%, experience at least one trauma in their life. I think the numbers are probably higher, but this is the numbers that they have from the surveys. Women are more likely to experience sexual assault and child sexual abuse than men are. Men are more likely to experience accidents, physical assault, combat, disaster, or to witness death or injury. About 7 or 8 out of every 100 people, or 7 to 8% of the population, will have post-traumatic stress at some point in their lives. Now, I was recently looking at something that popped up on, you know how you go on your computer and you pop up with all the stories of interest that can kind of get you way off track and somewhere that you don't know how you got there. But I saw a story of famous people who suffered from post-traumatic stress. One of them was Whoopi Goldberg, and it said that when she was a child, she witnessed 2 planes crashing in the air. So now every time she goes to get on a plane, she has a major anxiety and panic attacks, which is problematic because she travels a lot. So she's actually in therapy because of this, what she experiences. I think Barbara Streisand was another person who had suffered from post-traumatic stress. So, and I think hers was when she got up on stage, she couldn't remember the words to a song. And so now every time she's in therapy, because every time she goes to get up on stage, she has a flashback of that happening. It's not funny, I'm not laughing. She has a flashback of that happening, and it causes her to have that anxiety. So she also said that she's going through talk therapy, but it's not helping her. Because probably, again, as a psychologist, Dr. Apopa said earlier that there is not a war between psychology and theology and sociology, and there is not. There are a lot of similarities. Psychology actually takes a lot from scripture and theological ideas. Even Sigmund Freud, who formed his theories, did so against his Jewish parents, against the Bible, but still using the Bible because he was trying to go against it. So it's still all up in there. You can't separate it. So when we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, which is a major therapy that we use even for post-traumatic stress, cognitions, thoughts, lead to your behaviors. Biblical principle. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Biblical principle. So psychologists may think that they're, separating themselves from theology, but really the principles are there that you cannot, when you really want there to be results, you cannot separate yourself from those principles. So women are more likely to be neglected or abused in childhood, to experience domestic violence, or to have a loved one suddenly die. Women are likely to experience those things. And then there's some statistics about children, but we'll skip some of those things. Let's go to let's look at some early trauma effects on the nervous system. So when young people, for instance, go through trauma, the nervous system is shaped by the child's experience through development. Over time, stress can physically affect parts of the brain that manage emotions. And so that can have long-term effects on physical, mental, and emotional growth. So even as a young person, you may have gone through something even as a young adult, and we now know that the brain is still developing up until past what we thought. We thought 18, but now it goes up to, I believe, 25 when they're saying you're really still developing. And so complex trauma, those traumatic events, can lead to the brain not being properly developed in certain areas. So it's very important that it be dealt with very quickly. And so certain learning mechanisms and things in the brain can be affected through early childhood trauma. I'm going to leave a few minutes. Like I said, I'm not going to be able to get through all of this. I'm going to leave a few minutes for if people have any questions. Well, before that, let me talk a little bit about, from a psychological perspective, of what treatment is. So treatment for post-traumatic stress, one of the areas, like we talked about, cognitive behavioral therapy. So looking at your cognitions, how they affect your behavior, and looking at negative cognitions and how we can change those to be more positive. So negative cognitions, for instance, might be I'm not worth anything. A negative cognition might be it's my fault. I caused what happened to me. I wasn't strong enough. I should have done this. I should have done that. Those are all negative cognitions. Negative cognitions might be because you experienced trauma, you may now think that nothing good is going to happen. My life is now hopeless. I deal with so many young people day by day who feel like because they've gone through situations that their life is just on a downward spiral and they're just not going to ever be able to come out. They're beginning to feel feelings of hopelessness. So those are all negative cognitions. And so with cognitive behavioral therapy, what we do, we try to first identify what those negative thinking patterns are and then find evidence against them and change that around. And so from a Christian perspective, we understand that not only is it just reasoning and looking at facts, but also through Scripture. How does God see you? What does God say about you? What does God say about who you are as a person, about your worth, regardless of what you've gone through? So that is one. Another one is called EMDR. And EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So what that is that, and that's more for the adult and young adult population. What that is the person has to recall the event, but they don't say it out loud. They sort of think about it. And while they're thinking about it, they have to focus on something positive. Typically, it's something that the therapist is doing in the room. So what that is doing is training your brain to why you still remember the trauma to be able to think positively. So that the trauma does not only trigger those negative thoughts. So that's another way. Prolonged exposure therapy. So exposure therapy means that the things that you might have been avoiding, that you were afraid of, so now they find ways to expose you to that little by little. Where even the trauma itself, you begin to be able to first say it and write it out and eventually, as you're exposed to it longer and longer, it no longer has that same effect on you. Stress inoculation training, again, being able to sort of be able to deal with or manage distress in a more positive way. And then the SSRI that's medications, and so psychiatrists or medical doctors, even your GP may prescribe medications. There's not a whole lot of evidence that medication in and of itself, medication paired with therapy can be helpful, but there's limited evidence that just plain medication, there's different types of medications that they use. So that's it, so that's treatment. Any questions that anybody has? I know this is a lot of information, a lot of technical information, but any questions that anybody has regarding yes? Well, it depends on, I guess. Okay, so is this something that typically happens to you just sort of?
Personal stuff.